Hello coders, welcome to Tuesday morning. It is 7:12 GMT in the morning. I'm a little bit late by about 12 minutes. I do apologize. Well, what can I say? It all starts and ends with one word, and that is Murphy. So I took Murphy out for a walk this morning, about 6 o'clock. For a 15-minute walk, he did all the bits and pieces you need to do on the walk, let's just say. He was really good on his lead. We've been teaching him not to leash pull, which is sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, he was doing really well on that, and it was very good. And then when he's come back, he's just been nuts. So like, I took him out in the garden just before the stream, came back in, had a mess on the floor. So I've been cleaning carpets this morning. And other various things. Murphy, if you don't know, I should really mention this. He's 20-week-old English Springer Spaniel. He's a lovely guy, lovely chap. But if you hear any squeaks, any scratches, if you see any of the microphone moving, that's because Murphy right now is on my foot. And maybe I will show you him in the stream. I've also just recently upgraded my version of OBS, and I've noticed that none of my Stream Deck buttons work. So we're going to be pressing buttons the old school way, going back into the dark ages and going through OBS. Today what we're going to do is we're going to work on the template method design pattern in PHP. Now, the design pattern course that I'm doing, I'm hoping to do by some point next year, and we've been going through a lot of the behavioral patterns. We've also done the structural, some of the structural and the creational patterns as well, but we're focusing really on the behavioral patterns. And we've done if I go back into if I click this button here, go into the code, then we can see that we have done. Oh, no. We have done command, we've done iterator, we've done mediator, memento, observer, state, we did that last time, strategy, and what we've got left to do is we've got specification, visitor, and template. So we're going to be dealing with template today. But the others we've done, and we've been doing them using MARP, which is this lovely little tool that you can use to create slide decks. Murphy's having a world of fun under the desk with his toy. If you hear any squeaks, that's him. It isn't me, it's the dog. In the slides, we have a load of slides here that I'm going to use as a means of explaining the concept of these design patterns. And then what we've got above in the SRC section is we've actually got a real world example of using the design pattern. So that's kind of how it's going to work. So we're going to do the same thing this time, but for the template design pattern. Before I get into it, of course, I just want to thank everybody for following recently. We've got Jay Whisk. Is it Jay Witsky? Jay Witsky. We've got Pace70. We've got The Western Guy and Parcel Ticked for all following. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. We are now at 230 followers, which is absolutely incredible, which is fantastic. And we've got subscribers coming on too, which is wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining and supporting. If you are a Twitch subscriber, then you do get access to there's two channels in the Discord server. There is the Pro user channel and there is the Town Hall. The Pro user channel is a channel that we Twitch subscribers and Patreons access and talk amongst ourselves. And the Town Hall is a monthly thing that we did our first one last month, or the other weekend, I should say, where we all do a voice chat on Discord, and it's lovely to hear from the Twitch subscribers and the Patreons. There are other, of course, channels in the Discord server. Let me put this up. That's not going to work, is it? Let's put this into the chat. And that is Discord. These are for coding help. These are for coding questions, project feedback, all sorts of things. We've got loads of channels in there. We've also got discounts that I get from publication companies like A-Press and Manning. We've also got new coder channels. So if you're a new coder and you want to come on and say hello, then do join. It's free to join, but to get the town hall and to get the pro user channels, you'll need to be either a Twitch subscriber or a Patreon. Also, Patreons at the early access tier get early access to the YouTube videos that I do, and the podcasts as well. Anywho, let's crack on. So we've got we're going to deal with the template. Template. Now, let me talk a little bit about what the template pattern is. It's called the template method pattern. Template method pattern. I haven't had enough tea this morning. So it's a behavioral design pattern, and you've probably used it without, perhaps if you're a PHP dev or just an object-oriented programming dev, you've probably used it without actually realizing what it was called, because it's very, very common. If you just bear with me a minute, I just need to move Murphy away from that. Come here, buddy. Play with your toys. Don't play with the equipment. You know, that's not. Play with your toys and not the equipment. Thank you. Yes, so it's a behavioral design pattern, and it means that your subclasses are used. Their methods are used rather than the concrete. Not the concrete, sorry, the parent class methods. I call this in my head the cookie cutter pattern, because really what you're doing is you're designing a cookie cutter. If you think of how you would make cookies, you would make lots of cookies the same, right, using the same thing, and then maybe you'll sprinkle chocolate or icing or whatever, hundreds of thousands of sprinkles on individual ones. So they'll actually look very different, but they'll have the base cookie layer. Hello, thank you, Janet, for joining. Murphy is being a right tinker this morning. Leave the microphone stand alone. Yeah, so it's like a cookie cutter, right? So you end up creating a base class, and that base class has a way of dealing with perhaps an algorithm, okay? And then what happens is the classes that extend off of that base class can then feed into, or hook is probably a good word, hook into the algorithm. So you can manipulate and change how the algorithm works from the outer facing, the extending classes. It'll all make sense, I hope, as I code. If I can have the opportunity to, Murphy, come on. Little tinker this morning. Anyone would think that he hasn't had a walk this morning, he hasn't had a mess on the floor, and he hasn't gone out and ran around in the garden. So we're going to start as we did before with the concept. So what I'll do is I'll create a concept, and then from that I'll extend that into a real world example concept. Right, concept. Jesus, he's going to be winding me up today. I'm sure of it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create the base class. And the base class, what we're going to do is we're going to call this the processor.php. I will copy all of this just to make this a little bit speedy. Strict types is 1, that's great. Okay, this is the template. Come on, Murphy. Ugh, stop it. Excuse me, fellas. I'm gonna have to just. I'm gonna have to bring him up. That's what I'm gonna have to do because he's looking for attention. So I'll have to bring him up. Hold on. I'll go into this mood. Murphy. Right, Murphy. You see in that camera? Me. I am trying to do the template design pattern. I am, and you're not helping. You're not. Right. He's never going to get too big for that. Okay, so we're going to have a process. So the processor has a process method. We're not going to worry about any implementation here. We're going to change that, obviously fix that up to be template. Okay. So this is going to be a protected. Yeah, right. And what we're going to do is we're going to create methods for the actual process. So, for example, let me just let's put in data. I haven't decided yet what that's going to be. Is it going to return a string? Let's return a Boolean. So let's do a protected method, which is actually let's do a private method, which is let's do step. Again, this is a concept, right? This is a concept. So step one. Whoopsie. Private function, isn't it? Let's get it right. He's put his bone, his chewing bone, on the table leg, and he's chewing it. So if you're hearing any noises up through the microphone, it's because he's banging on he's bashing the bone against the table leg. We've got one of these buffalo bones, which keeps him quiet, which is nice, but he just scrapes it. It's like one of these horror films. He scrapes it all over the place, all over the floor. So step one, we're going to have another one, step two, right? So we can do something like this, step one, this. Did I call this? This is step two. And we'll just pass data through. I haven't really decided what that is. Let's do an array. Why not? So we pass that in, like all of these things, all the way here, and we return. Let's say we return a Boolean again. So let's do true. Let's do return true. I'm just doing this as a concept. Now, let's say, for instance, there is another step to this, but we don't want to have this processor shouldn't have actually any control over that. Again, this is going to return a Boolean, isn't it? So what we want to do is we want to have different processes accessing the process method, which then in turn accesses the steps. But we want to hook in another step. So let's say, for example, we have a method here called process. A class process. Let's do user processor. I mean, it's very abstract. We're going to copy all of this. We're going to put this in here. This is going to make sense. I promise. We're going to hit extends. We're going to extend the processor itself. Processor. Why is that not coming up as a process. Why is that not? Other declaration of processor exists. User processor. Sorry, user processor. There we go. Extends processor. We don't need to have these, right? But we do need to have a public, or yeah, public function, and we're going to do run. Now run is going to do this process. We're going to pass in an array here, which is data. We're going to pass that into here. We're going to return whatever is returned from the actual process mechanism. Okay, so what we've done here is we've created a user processor, and which we can run it. We pass in an array. Now this is going to call the base class this process. This process is going to call step 1 and step 2 that are defined in here. Let's say, for example, we want to define step 3, right? So we do this step 3. Now we haven't defined what step 3 is yet in this algorithm, but what we can do, let's say we want to define it, but we don't want to define it in the actual processor. Maybe we've got another processor here. Let's say we've got, instead of user, we've got something that is called I don't know, order processor. An order processor extends processor as well. So we do run and then the process. And in here we need to define what step 3 is. And step 3 is specific to either the order and the user, which means that what we can do is we can create an abstract method, and we can call this, it's an abstract protected method, which is step 3. Again, that's a Boolean, and we pass in data array. Whoops. Okay. Now, because that's an abstract method, in here we can create, because it extends, we should be able to, can we implement or override? One of the two. Oh, hang on. What have I done wrong here? Something's not wired up properly. Order processor, process. Murphy, no, that's not a good idea. Do not go in there. Thank you. In that box, there is a lot of wires that aren't connected to anything, of course. They're just a box of wires, but still, really don't want you running around the house with that. Let me think. What have I done wrong here? We've got abstract protected function, step 3. That closes that off. This does need to be abstract. Of course it does. It's an abstract class. So the abstract class is the processor, and we are extending from the processor. Let me just see if I've got everything wired up correctly. Abstract protected. Oh yes, I'm missing the function word. What a moron, of course. I need tea. I need some tea. Bear with me a minute. I need some sort of caffeine injection. Wow, I didn't see the word function was missing, did I? Okay. So it's an abstract class, right? Which means that you can't instantiate it. Like, you can't have a constructor, which means that you can apply rules on this abstract class that require the extending classes like the order processor and the user processor. Can you see the red lines now? They are required to follow the convention, the contract, I should say, that is outlined by the abstract class, and that is, if I can find it, has it? Come on, implement methods. There we go. Step 3. It is required to have step 3, which means Murphy, stop that. Required in the order processor, in the user processor, sorry, to have that too. Okay, which means that we can return something in here. So let's do return true here, and in the order processor, let's do a return false, for instance. Return. Now, where would this be common? Because I said earlier this is a common design pattern. This would be common in places like validation. This would be common in places where you're doing lots of different things that follow a similar convention, that use a similar algorithm, and you want to hook into that algorithm. Because what we're doing here, of course, on the processor is we're saying that, this is the way this gets processed, step 1, step 2, and step 3, but it's up to the concrete classes to define what step 3 actually is. So if you think of it like a form validation, and if you think that you've got lots of different elements of that form, say you've got an input box, or a text field, or a check box, or some other radio button, there we go, or a button, or what have you. You've got all of these very different form elements, but they still need to be validated. So they follow a similar standard of validation, but then they have their own validation rules themselves. So, for example, you would have a different validation rule for a checkbox than you would have for a select box. However, if they are required, then you would always be checking whether the values are there, regardless of what the values are. So that would be the process that would be in the base class. I might just change this to be form validation, because this is probably an easier concept for me to put down on code. So imagine, if you will, this was a validator. Validator. Come on, Murphy. You're leaning on the microphone stand. Okay, so that's the validator, and we're going to do is valid, like that. And that is going to return, if we did, I don't know, let's change that to be something like is required, or is has value. There we go, has value. So that perhaps potentially returns true. So we've got has value here. Then we've got something like is, I don't know, I'm making this up now, is null. So that would be false. And then potentially, we'll work through these in a minute. So what we want to do here is we've got has value here. Oh, come on, Magic Mouse. And then we've got is null there. So imagine, if you will, this is data about the form, right? And we want to create an if here. If has value, okay? And this is null, passing in the array. So if that is false, so if has value is true, so we do true. 1, 2, 3, and is null is false. 1, 2, 3. Okay, then what we do under here, this isn't Python, move it over here. Come on, Pete, remember what programming language you're working in. We then run the validation that is specific to the element. So for instance, this could be something like validate element, element. Okay, so I mean that we're going to return that as false, which is good, and we're going to return that as true. That's awesome. So that's going to work. And then we have validate element itself, so we put that in here. Now, let's change this to make it a little bit more sense. So let's change that to be let's do text field validator, and let's change that. Needs to be changed, doesn't it? The actual processor here needs to be renamed. Let's refactor that. Okay, so we got the is value here. So has value is if it's true and if that is not null, then we run the validate element, which is defined by the actual element. So that's text field. We're going to do one here for rename. We do something for let's think of another one. My mind's gone blank. Of all the HTML elements, there are form elements. Radio. So it's radio field validator. Wonderful. So, okay, awesome. So we've got radio field validator here. Let's change that. That needs to then be validate element. Yep. So radio field extends the validator, which means that needs to be validate element. We're gonna have a function called validate, and we're going to run. What was the processor on here? Validator. Oh no, it is called validate, and that's going to validate. No, hang on. There we go. Sorry, is valid. So the radio field is going to call this is valid, passing in the data. Excellent. The text field is then going to is extending the validator. That's going to do validate, and that's going to do is valid. Okay, so then that needs to be validate element. Jeez. It's only 3 classes, man. Okay. So let's see if we could step through this a little bit. So we've got the abstract class or validator, which means that I can now have many elements that I want to validate. Because they extend the validator class, they have the isValid method. The isValid method runs this algorithm, which works out whether or not well, the end goal is to check whether this is actually valid. So let's do a return of that, and then let's do a return false, which means that if this isn't true, if this whole thing here isn't true, then we return false. So if it's true, if that has the value data, then and this isn't null, then we run the validate element. Validate element isn't defined by this class, isn't defined by the validator. That method, because we're running an abstract class, because this is the defined as an abstract protected method here, we can then implement that here. So we've got validate element there, and we've got validate element here. Now, let's take a look at actually making this a thing. So what I'm going to do, because I need to make this as a proper example, we've got an array here. What I think I might do is pass that in as just a string, just to keep it as so that would be actually value, right? Not data. Just to try and keep the concept as simplistic as possible, I think. So that is now strings. Hello, Murphy. You all right? Where'd you go? Literally just ran out of the office and then came back with another toy. Because apparently the other toys he's got aren't good enough. No, he's good. I woke up to him this morning with he was just sort of like laying. I could hardly breathe when I woke up because he was laying like across my chest. It took a while to work out what it was because I thought, I'm very warm. But I went to bed super late last night because I was doing some bits and pieces for the podcast. We've got something interesting happening in the next few weeks, I should say. I won't give too much away, but on the podcast, something's going to be. The end of year podcast show is going to be slightly different. Let's just say that. So I was sort of playing with that, speaking to people on that last night. So that's going to be interesting. So I'm a little bit knackered, to be honest. I think I had about 5 hours sleep. So I'm very tired. So if you notice I'm being a little bit cranky, it's especially towards Murphy. It's because I'm knackered. Okay, so let me have a look. We have the validator here. We've got the isValid. That's going through as a string. This is fine. I should run PHP stan, I think, to just make sure that this is all, come on, all good, but I'm not getting any red lines. Okay, just having a look at the, I think I'm just having a read of the comments there. Abandon has said, I think line 13 condition are inverted. I think is null can accept string if. Oh, you clever clogs. You clever clogs. Yes, you're right. Because, all right, let me think of this. So we've got has value. That's just going to check whether there is a value, and is null is going to check whether it is null. This is where we're moving away from the concept into something that is more real world, aren't we? So let me have a think. So is value, we really should be checking whether or not this is empty. So let's do return. Sort of is, if I can remember how to use PHP. And then this would be return, I guess, is null. That's not a great one, is it? Let me think. So that's going to return whether it is empty or not. But because it's a string, let's define that as an empty string. There we go. So, yeah, that's a bit of a misnomer. I tell you what we could do, right? Instead of the is null, right? What we could do is we could grab the value and we could clean the value, couldn't we? We could do value is equal to trim of the value. There we go. And that means that all we're doing here is we're trimming the value, which means that we don't need that anymore. And then that can become an empty string. Okay, so this thing here, we make sure that we've trimmed it down, and then we check whether there is a value that is not empty. It's a little bit of a crazy one because it's like, well, why is that even a method? That should be that should be false. I think we could probably make this a lot simpler. So let's do if that's false, empty value. So we can remove that. So this is like a cleanup script, really. It cleans it, then checks whether that is empty. And then, so if that isn't empty, then we validate the element. Yeah. Good spot, Abandon. Well done. You've obviously had more caffeine than me. Okay. That's my excuse. I'm sticking with it. Okay, so we've got the radio field, we've got the text field here. I guess we should actually run some tests, right? I mean, that would work. First of all, let's create our view. So this is the template example. The value which we're going to supply in this instance is we're going to put in someone's name. We'll just do, tell you what, well, let's just do type how to code well. How to code well, like that. This is a template method, really, not a template, but we will see. 3 coffees. Oh my word. You got to be careful, man. 3 coffees. Okay, let's remove all of this junk because we don't need any of that stuff. Not in this one. And we're going to remove all of these things. We're going to instantiate. We're going to do a text. So we're going to do text field value, and that is going to be the value itself. We're going to. So let's just remove that. We're going to do a text field validator. Validator is equal to a new text field validator. No, wrong buttons. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another one, and we're going to do radio field value. Surprise, surprise. And that's going to be radio. Okay, all right. Let's focus first of all on, and that needs to be radio too. Let's focus on the text field first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do text field validator. Validate, and we're going to validate this value. That is going to. I think Murphy is asleep. Wow. I should have started the stream now. So we're going to do is valid here, is text field valid. And we're going to do, we're just going to echo that out. So echo text field is, and then we're going to have a ternary operator in here. So we're going to do is valid. Ternary, not ternary, ternary even. Gosh, words are difficult this morning. Ternary. So is if that's true, then we'll is valid. Else is invalid. Is it 2 words or 1 word? That's 1 word. Invalid. Okay, and we'll put that as a p tag. Cool. No, that's going to throw a wobbly, isn't it? That's going to throw a wobbly. Let's not do that. Let's just leave it like that for now. Let's go to the code and actually run this. That would help, wouldn't it? var tools terminal localhost, I think. Was it localhost? No. Yes, no, yes, it was. Let's go out of this. We're in the state pattern now. So we need to go into, it was template. Let's do an ls, go into the, whoa, where is the view? Oh yeah, it's in the concept. Okay, fine. I thought I was working in a different thing there. View. Okay, let's do a PHP-s. Bring this local server, bring this bad boy up and running, shall we? Let's click on yet. Oh dear, it's blown up. All right, so let's work through this. Fatal error, uncaught class, text field validator not found. Da, 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 da. So what's going on there? Number 13 here. Text field validator. Text field validator. Okay, I've obviously screwed up something. I've got a feeling my example output. Yes, I've got a feeling my namespaces are wrong. Let me have a quick look. Example output. Yes, that's not right, is it? That's supposed to be concept. And really, it's not a concept. It's actually text validator, isn't it? It's actually form field validation. Form field validation. That's what we're doing here. Which means that I need to, let's do a refactor rename, copy that. We need to put that into these. Which means that in the view, I need to change that to be that. And then hopefully we can refresh and that blows a hole in the server. Why? What have I done wrong? No such file or directory. Oh, it's because I'm in the wrong. Okay, let's do an ls here. Interesting. There we go. There we go. It is valid. Yay, it's valid. Why, though, is that not printing? Echo text field is valid. Why is that not printing that out? Have I really screwed this up? Let's put in output here. Let's equal that to the output. I don't think I can concatenate that. Ha, can't talk. Text field is invalid. All right, it's invalid. Why is it invalid? That should be valid. So we go to the text field validator here. Oh, it's because it's returning false. Okay, so let's do if the value is equal to, let's do hello coders, then return true. Then return false. Wonderful. So that's still going to return false, right? That's still going to be invalid. But if I was to change the here to be hello coders up here. In fact, we'll just put it in there because, you know, to save space. Hello coders. So we don't need that anymore. Goodbye. That should now be valid. Yay! Okay, cool. Let me just do a quick recap because I would imagine people would be like, why you've done so much work for just that. Let me just do a recap. Okay, so we have our let's bring that down. We have our validator, and the validator has the method isValid. It is protected. This means that we cannot access this from outside of this class. It's not public. We cannot access this from the index. We can't do isValid. We can only run the validate routine because this is the only public thing. And I should have made that more clear, I think. Can I tidy this up? It looks a bit. There we go. So we can only run the validate routine here. That's the only one we can do. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return that as it's a boolean that gets returned. We cannot run validate element at all. We can only run the validate routine. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one step further and I'm going to create an interface. We're going to call this field validator interface. Now the field validator interface is going to have, if I just copy that, is going to have the validate routine. And it's going to return a Boolean. Okay. So this is an interface, isn't it? Come on, get me things right. Right. So this is the interface that all validators must adhere to. So the radio validator here must implement the field validator interface. That must return a Boolean, which it does. So I'm going to put in some comments here and some comments here. The text field validator also implements the field validator interface, which means that is going to be required as well. Again, I'll put in some comments. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got the validator routine. It is an abstract class, so we can't create this class. It is an abstract class, which means that this class, because it's abstract, can have abstract methods that are required. It's basically setting up the template, if you will. This is the template for the other classes to have. So this is the as I mentioned earlier, the cookie cutter. This is the cookie cutter. The cookie cutter has its own algorithm here, which checks whether it is valid or not. But notice that this is a protected method, which means that we cannot access this from outside of the class scope, right? So we can't do is valid in here. Not at all. No. But it is protected, which means that we can access it from the extending classes. This is going to return a Boolean. It's just going to trim the value, and then it's going to run validate element. Now, validate element method is an abstract protected function. It is protected, which means that, again, we cannot access it from outside the class scope. We can't do it in here. Because it's abstract, we are saying that anything that extends validator must have the validate element, and it must conform to this signature. However, we're not enforcing how the validate element should be, the behavior of that, apart from the fact that it returns a Boolean and a string is required. So we're not actually defining the body of this at all. Okay, cool. We then create our field validators. So we've got the text field validator here, which extends the validator, which means that we must have the validate element routine. Again, it's protected. This means that we can't access it from outside the class scope. Same with the radio field. We have the validate element here. Well, I don't understand why that's that needs to be. Hang on. Yeah, that should be, if I was to do this right, that should be above, just to get conformity here. Okay, cool. So we've got the validate element here on the radio. We'll tidy that up in a minute. We'll demonstrate what that does in just a second. But in these concrete classes, we do have a public function. Now, the public function is the validate routine. The validate routine calls upon the isValid protected method, which is based in the in the validator here. Now, I've also created an interface that ensures that we must have this validate method on these elements, which means that when I create a new element, and I'll do so, I'll create a third one in just a second, I need to conform to this sort of way of working. I don't have to worry about, cleaning up cleaning up the stuff. I don't have to worry about the algorithm that runs here at all. All I need to do is worry about the hooks that I'm hooking into here. And again, we can have more than one abstract function here, which we could create more than one hook. We could have a before hook and we could have an after hook. We could have a pre-hook and a post-hook, you know. Okay, so let's see here. We've got on the index here, we've got all of this good stuff. Let's see if we can get the radio field working as well. So we've got the radio field value. I'm just going to put that as 1, a string of, not 1. Let's do, I don't know, apples or something daft. So radio field validator is going to be added there. And again, we do is radio field valid. We're going to equal this to radio field validator validate. And we're going to validate apples. Why not? And again, we're going to do the same thing here, where that is the is valid of that. And we're going to do radio field is, and we're going to dive into the validate routine of here. We're going to tinker around with the validate element here. So we're going to do if value 1, 2, 3 is pairs. Return true. Return false. Okay. There we go. So we got the text field is valid, but the radio field is invalid. And let's tidy that up a little bit more. Can we do a put? Can I now put these in p tags, please? Just having a look at the time there. It's all good. It's all good. Meetings don't happen for another few hours. But I do need to shoot off about 8:30 this morning because, well, obviously I need to write some code for people before the meetings, obviously, and I need my breakfast. There we go. So the text field is valid, but the radio field is invalid. Okay, so let's see how do I go about creating a new one. So let's say, for example, we want to create a checkbox. What I would do is I would copy this, I would paste this in here, I would call this checkbox field validator, like so, and we'll change that. Checkbox field validator. We have the validate and we have the validate element parts in here, which is good. Let's change that to be something completely random. Let's do this to be, I don't know, shoes. Because Murphy had my shoes earlier. Why not? So we go and create some more of these. This is now the checkbox. And the idea of all of this, I mean, the whole point of these design patterns is that you're creating a pattern for yourself and other developers to conform to, and you're architecting the software that you're writing. Checkbox, check field valid. Is check field valid? There we go. And that is shoes. So we should have valid, invalid, and then valid. Shoes. Come on. And this is check. There we go. So the check field is valid, the radio field is invalid, and the text field is valid. And we're doing this by creating little small classes that hook into the validator routine, passing in the validate element. Now we could go one step further if we wanted to. I mentioned earlier about the pre and the post hooks. I guess that could probably help visualize this a little bit more, because we've just got validate element. So let's do a pre pre-validate. Let's do a post-validate. Excuse me, that's my stomach rumbling. I am so hungry. Grab a drink of water. So now you can, I'm hoping you can see this as more of a plug-in type thing now, because we can now, in these things, we must conform therefore to the pre and the post. So let's implement those methods, the pre and the post. And so this is the check field validator, isn't it? So let's on the pre-validate routine, we could have something that does. I'm just thinking like let's return Boolean on that as well. So let's do if value if is string. No, it is a string, isn't it? Because I'm defining it as a string. If value is equal to true, then return true. Let's do if false. There we go. If false, return false. Return true. Okay. In the actual validator itself, what we're going to do is we're going to do value trim. We're also going to do this pre-validate, passing in the value, and we're going to do if is pre-valid. We'll do if, false 1 2 3 is pre-valid. Return false. So in the check field, we have a way of doing the first ever check before we do anything else. So after we've done a trim, we can run a pre-valid. If that is false, then we return false. If it's true, then we continue on and do our thing. But now, can you see we're actually starting to build out a mechanism here. This is post-valid. So let me tidy this up because this isn't going to work, is it? So we've got the trim, then we've got the is valid. We could probably tidy this up. So if that is valid and false is empty, then we part that in. So we validate the element. Okay, that will return the isValid method. Let's set that to be false at the top here. Let's put that down in here, isValid in there. So if that is, so that will change to either true or false. And then let's think about this. is valid, validate is valid here. If is valid is false. Okay, let's park that out. If that is false, 1, 2, 3. Return false. We do the same under here, so is valid. So it's like a series of checks. So we set it to false first. Then what we do is we run is valid pre-validate check. If that returns false, then we return false. If it returns true, we continue on to the next one here. So the next one here is then validating the actual element. So again, we want to put this in here underneath. If that returns true, then we continue on to the post validator. Which we can override to is valid, and then we return is valid. So at each point we are checking whether or not, and that's going to return true or false, isn't it? So the pre-validator is either going to return true or false, so that's fine. So at each point we are doing a validation pre-validate, a validate in the middle, and then we're doing a validate afterwards. So this is now our is validate mechanism. Now, what we can do, because we've got these three here, we can tidy this up slightly. So we've got, what was I working on? The checkbox one here. So we've got the pre-validate. So if the value is false, then we return false as a string. Post-validate here. I guess what we could do is we want to do if value is equal to all. Maybe there's an all option. We want to return true. If yeah, well, we need to check if that is dash. There we go. Then we return false. Okay, else we return true. So basically this means that it can either be shoes or it can be shoes, but it cannot be false, and it cannot be a dash. In the radio field, we're going to do a similar thing. So we're just going to copy this. In the text validator, let's say, for example, maybe this was validating a password. So what we would do is perhaps in the pre-validate, we would validate the size of the string. So maybe we want to do if strlen of the value is less than, I don't know, 8, then we return false. Just make sure that's correct. Yep. And then maybe if we do on the post validate, we do just trying to think, preg match. Let's see. Preg match int returns 1 if the pattern matches given. Is that what I want to do? I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe not. I want to sort of create a little bit of more complexity of this. Preg match all. PHP match. Yeah, it is preg match. Of course it is. Preg match. We're going to pass in, what do I need? The pattern that we're going to put in. The subject, which is value. And this is going to be something like, let's say I want to match the word coders, something like that. Okay, so if that returns false, 1, 2, 3, then that's going to return false. If that's going to return an integer, then actually, could I just return that? So it's an integer, returns 1 if the pattern matches the given subject. Returns 1, yeah. So that would be true. I don't know why there's 1. 0 if it doesn't, or false. Okay, so I do need to check whether it's 0 or 1. All right, fair enough. So that is false. So let's do match. Matched is equal to this. And then let's do if that's matched or matched is equal to 0. Return false. Else return true. Okay, cool. Why is that highlighted? 1, 2, 3. That should be okay. Maybe it's just the regex. All right, so let's see if we can run this again. Yeah, that is working. So if I was to change the index file here, if I was to change this to be hello foo, that would be invalid. And it's invalid because it doesn't match hello coders, and the post validate doesn't have that in there. So if I do, if I change that to be hello, yep, that's still invalid. If that doesn't equal that, or value 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's now valid, but that is okay. Yeah, so that's cool. Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Okay, so the idea here is that we've created ourselves some hooks that we can hook around. Pre-validate and post-validate. We could, for instance, we could tidy up this. We could, if this was from form elements, we could use these as a means of tidying the value up before we run the validation. So, for example, we could, instead of having the pre-validate, this could be a cleanup script. All right, to clean up this particular value. We do have a way of trimming the value down here in that, but it might be different. Like, for example, on the text field, we may want to have the value just be uppercase or lowercase or something like that. Now that would require us to actually persist the value and pass the value around as well. But I'm not overly worried about that at the moment. With the radio field, again, we're checking for dashes, Whoops. And whether it's false or not. To be honest, the validate routine wouldn't pick this up at all because we're only checking whether that is there. So really, to be honest, there's no need, in this example at least, to have these pre or post validate routines. But I just wanted to demonstrate that you could use this as a mechanism to hook around the before and after. So I think what I'll do, just to prevent confusion, is I think I might just remove these things because they're not actually that necessary. So let's remove that, and let's remove in radio pre, and let's remove that, and in here, because there really isn't, like, because of the validate routine, because we're only checking the value. So we remove those two, and what we'll do here is we'll just remove this, and we'll remove that. Essentially, that is where we were beforehand after I went on to that random tangent. So let's refresh. Yep, they're still valid, invalid, and valid. If I was to change this to be hello you, that would be invalid because it's not hello foo or hello coders. So we'll do hello coders here. So that's essentially it. That is essentially it. We've got a few minutes. What I'll do is I will create the... Murphy has finally started snoring. We will work on the slides, I think, first. We'll do that. Otherwise, I'll get so sidelined. So we worked on the state pattern last time, didn't we? So I'm going to copy the concept part. This is in the template. There we go. And we're going to start by having the validator itself. So I'm going to change all of this to be actually the more of a conceptual thing. So let's go down to here, template, 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 change all of that. Right, we're going to remove this. Oh, and one thing I should say as well, because one thing I should say is that because this is protected, there is the ability to completely and utterly override this and blow a hole into this for every validator, because we could override it because it's protected. What we could do to get around that is we could create it as a final function. Let me just make sure that this is all still running. Yeah, which means that we cannot at all override this. This is the final method. It's now set in stone. So I will definitely make that clear. We're going to call this processor again. We're going to go back to what it was, processor, because the validate routine was more of a real-world example. So this is going to be process, passing in the values. We're going to then run this as, say, processed, and that's going to be step 1, passing in the value, processed. Whoops. In fact, we don't need to even include this as a value, to be honest. That's because this is only a concept. This is step 2, and then this here is step 3. Step 3. Step 3 is going to be our magic little so that's going to return void for now. Step 3 is our magic little thing that we need to pass in our abstract. Okay, so that's the first thing. We create the processor. Then what we do is we create whoops, 3 lines, 3 backticks. Then what we do is we create the extending classes. So this isn't now abstract. This is, say, let's do item processor. Keep it nice and generic. Item processor extends processor. So we don't have that. This item processor must have a protected function, which is step 3, which is a Boolean, of course. So this is going to return, I don't know, true or something daft. Doesn't matter. I guess what I should do is I should do a public, a protected function, or even better, private function. Step 1, passing in the value, and just have that return like true or something. Return true. Return true. Hopefully this is all going to fit on the slide deck, but we'll see that in a minute. P. There we go. So that's step 2 now. So we've got step 1 and step 2. Step 3 is our abstract that we did beforehand. Let's put a space in there, and a space in there, and a space in there. So the magic is the abstract method here. So that's step 3, which is like so. And then let's do another one as well, just to prove, just to get the concept. So let's do item processor. Let's do user processor, where we have step 3 here, and we're going to return false. Marvelous. Okay. So then we need to have another slide where we instantiate these things. So we do something like user processor is equal to new user processor. Whoops. We also have the one above. I'm not doing this in backticks, am I? We have order processor. Sorry, we have item processor. Not order processor, item processor. Oops, no, that is capitals. Okay, let's put this in backticks. Boom, boom, boom. PHP. I'm doing this in backticks because, of course, this is markdown file. This markdown file is going to generate the slides because we're using MARP, and I'm hoping that this is all going to fit on one slide. This one here. So the 3 dashes denote the slides. So we got the item processor, we got the user processor. Now I guess I need to actually do. I guess I need to run the processor. So I guess I need to have a public function run this process. This is you could call this as a hook, I suppose, because you are hooking into it. You are actually that is the mechanism that runs And then I guess because I've done that, I guess I could do an interface just to tidy all the stuff up, just to wrap it in a bow. So let's put the interface below this slide. PHP again. So the interface is, let's just copy, even though I don't need to, let's just copy all that. That is going to be the interface. This is going to be processor interface. There we go. And that's not going to have this at all. It's not going to have that at all. But it is going to have a public function called run. We pass in a string. And I guess whatever, that could be, yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, cool. So, excuse my stomach. We need to implement that. And we also need to implement that here because we have the run method here. We need to pass in a string, which is our value. Both of these things. Let's see, does this all wire up? I think it does. This is all good. So which means that under here we can do item processor run, passing in test data, test item data, and then here we can pass that in and call this test user data. Okay, let's see if we can get the actual slides running now, because I've written a lot of code and I don't know whether the slides will cover all of that. So let's just do terminal. Let's come out of, well, no, let's go to there. Design patterns code. There is a, that's PHP stan. Yeah, can you tell? Can you tell? Pete needs a shot of caffeine or something stronger. I can't remember what it was. npx, wasn't it? npx, that was the command. Are we in the right place? Probably not. Let's just try it. npx, I don't think we are in the right place, are we? We're in code. Code is there. No, I think we need to be... no, no, we're not. I think we need to be in this directory before I do that. Yeah, I need a breakfast break. That's what I need. But I'm gonna shoot off in a minute because I do need to I need to crack on with my day, but I just want to get this sort of out the way, because if I get the slide stuff done, then I can draw a line under this design pattern. But Murphy's fine. Murphy's fine, isn't he? He's all right. So, where did that go? That went somewhere. That went into the index file, didn't it? That went to dist and index. And if I open that up in Safari again, yay! Okay, behavioral. Click on that. Open this up. And we've worked on the template pattern, behavioral design pattern, the concept. So this is where I'll explain a concept. There may be a talking head here of me. We got 7 slides, so something's happened. Okay, so this is good. This is all on one slide. I like that. Apart from that crazy thing, what's going on there? What's going on there? That's not good. Where did that's in slides, behavioral. I've put something in aha, gotcha. Right, there we go. So we've got the abstract class, which is the processor, which we run the process. Step 1, step 2 are defined in this class, but step 3 are that's abstract, which means that this is extending classes need to have step 3, and it must return a Boolean as well. And then we go into 4. We've got the processor interface. We have run, which means that all processors that implement that processor interface must have the run method. Okay, so what we do here is we do the this is the item processor. Come on, Magic Mouse. Item processor. We have defined step 3 here, and we've got the run implementation there. So that's good. It kind of all fits on that slide, which is nice. Then we have, so that's the item, that's the user. They follow very similar conventions. And then here, this is how you wire it up. So you implement the item processor and the user processor, and then you run it with various data, and then that will return true or false, or however the mechanism works. But that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the template pattern. It's a really nice one. I really do like this pattern because it solves a lot of problems. It allows you to hook in things. And if you do it right, then you move away from the God class type sort of scenario where you have one class that does lots and lots of things. You can have one class that defines lots of abstract methods that you must hook into. Which is nice, which means that when you add things to this in the future, it's pretty cool, and more extendable and a little bit robust. So that is that. I'm super happy. I'm going to run before I shoot. I'm going to run off before I run off. I'm going to run PHP stan, and I'm fingers crossed I haven't broken anything. PHP. Oh, I need to come from. Would it be easier if I did it from this directory? Yes, probably. Come on. So cd into code, ls, where are we? Yeah, okay, src. Can we do a reverse search of PHP stan? Src sections, go for it. I fixed a load last night. Yes, they're up and running. Awesome. Phew! Right, I'm going to dive off. I've got to continue on with my... my day. I've got to also, Murphy has just, if you look into my, like, you can't see it, but if you look into the hallway, it's like a meeting of minds. We've got Murphy and my 2 cats. Cats are up against the wall, and Murphy is poised to play. So I best sort that out. And also I've got lots of other freelance bits and pieces to do as well. But I need to crack on. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. If you haven't done so already, please do consider joining the Discord server. We've got we've got a nice community growing there. We've got almost 100 members now of coders and developers learning code and answering other people's questions. It's a really nice community, so do join. And also do check out the podcast as well. Thank you very much, Tieran, for mentioning that. That is howtocodewell.fm. There'll be a new podcast coming this Friday. Thank you very much. Happy coding, everyone. See you again soon. Cheers. Bye-bye. My Stream Deck doesn't work. I'll have to turn this off manually. Where's the button? There's the button. All right. Bye-bye.